replacing the old FPE breakers with new old stock or NOS UL listed non-FPE breakers in an old FPE panel is generally considered a reasonable solution to address concerns about the reliability of the original FPE breakers. One advantage of retrofitting with new old stock breakers is improved safety. Modern breakers have better tripping mechanisms and are less likely to malfunction, reducing the risk of electrical fires and other hazards. Another advantage is that it eliminates specific concerns. Replacing the 240-volt two-pole breakers with non-FPE breakers addresses the specific concern about the potential failure to trip on line to neutral faults. Several considerations need to be taken into account. Firstly, compatibility. Ensure that the new old stock breakers are compatible with the FPE panel and meet the electrical requirements of the circuit. Secondly, availability. New old stock breakers may be difficult to find, especially for older or less common models. Thirdly, cost. Replacing all the breakers can be expensive, especially if new old stock breakers are used. Fourthly, reliability. While new old stock breakers are considered reliable, it's important to note that they are not new and may have been in storage for some time. Although UL does not test or list refurbished equipment, using new old stock breakers is generally preferable to installing used breakers of unknown origin. If safety and reliability are primary concerns, then retrofitting an old FPE panel with new old stock non-FPE breakers is a reasonable option. It eliminates the potential risks associated with old FPE breakers while maintaining compatibility with the existing panel. However, it's important to consult with a qualified electrician to assess the specific needs of the electrical system and determine the best course of action. For the compatibility consideration, this means verifying that the amperage rating of the replacement breaker matches the amperage rating of the circuit it is protecting. Using a breaker with a higher amperage rating than the circuit is designed for can create a fire hazard. For example, replacing a 15 amp breaker with a 20 amp breaker on a circuit wired with 14 American wire gauge or AUG copper wire could allow the wire to overheat and potentially cause a fire. It is also important to ensure that the interrupting rating of the replacement breaker is sufficient for the potential fault current at the panel location. The interrupting rating is the maximum amount of current that a breaker can safely interrupt during a short circuit. This rating is typically marked on the breaker itself. If the fault current exceeds the interrupting rating of the breaker may fail to interrupt the current, potentially leading to equipment damage or personal injury. An electrician can perform a fault current calculation to determine the available fault current at the panel. Another aspect of compatibility is the physical size and configuration of the breaker. The new old stock breakers must physically fit into the FPE panel and make proper electrical connections. FPE panels have a specific bus bar configuration, and the replacement breakers must be designed to mate with this configuration. Some new old stock breakers may require the use of adapters or other hardware to ensure proper fit and connection. It is also important to consider the voltage rating of the breakers. In residential applications, most branch circuit breakers are rated for 120 volts or 120/240 volts. The replacement breakers must have a voltage rating that is equal to or greater than the voltage of the circuit they are protecting. If the voltage rating of the breaker is too low, it may fail to operate properly or could be damaged during a fault. When considering the availability of new old stock breakers, it is important to be aware that they may be more difficult to find than new breakers. This is because new old stock breakers are no longer in production and may only be available from surplus dealers or online marketplaces. It is important to purchase new old stock breakers from a reputable source to ensure that they are in good working condition and have not been tampered with. It is also important to check the age of the breakers. While new old stock breakers have never been used, they may have been in storage for many years. Over time, the internal components of the breaker can degrade, potentially affecting its performance. If the breakers are very old, it may be wise to consider using new breakers instead, even if they are not an exact match for the FPE panel. When considering the cost of replacing all the breakers in an FPE panel, it is important to obtain quotes from multiple suppliers and compare the prices of new or old stock breakers with the prices of new breakers. In some cases, new breakers may be more cost-effective than new old stock breakers, especially if a large number of breakers need to be replaced. It is also important to factor in the cost of labor for the electrician to install the new breakers. The labor cost will vary depending on the complexity of the installation and the electrician's hourly rate. When evaluating the reliability of new old stock breakers, it is important to inspect them carefully for any signs of damage or corrosion. Check the breaker housing for cracks or chips, and examine the contacts for corrosion or pitting. If the breakers show any signs of damage, they should not be used. It is also a good idea to test the breakers before installing them to ensure that they trip properly. This can be done using a breaker tester, which applies a known current to the breaker and measures the time it takes for the breaker to trip. If the breaker does not trip within the specified time, it should not be used. Even if the new old stock breakers appear to be in good condition, it is important to understand that they may not be as reliable as new breakers. This is because the internal components of the breaker may have degraded over time, even if the breaker has never been used. For this reason, it is important to use caution when relying on new old stock breakers for critical safety functions. When recommending retrofitting an old FPE panel with new old stock non-FPE breakers, it is important to emphasize the importance of consulting with a qualified electrician. An electrician can assess the specific needs of the electrical system and determine the best course of action. The electrician can also inspect the existing FPE panel for any signs of damage or deterioration and recommend any necessary repairs or replacements. In addition to assessing the condition of the FPE panel, the electrician can also evaluate the overall electrical system in the home and identify any other potential safety hazards. This may include checking the wiring for proper grounding, inspecting the outlets and switches for damage, and verifying that the electrical panel is properly labeled. By taking a comprehensive approach to electrical safety, the electrician can help to ensure that the home is safe and free from electrical hazards. Furthermore, the electrician can ensure that the new old stock breakers are properly installed and connected. This is important to ensure that the breakers will operate correctly and provide reliable protection against overloads and short circuits. The electrician can also provide guidance on the proper use and maintenance of the electrical system, helping to prevent future problems. In some cases, retrofitting an old FPE panel with new old stock non-FPE breakers may not be the best option. If the FPE panel is severely damaged or deteriorated, it may be necessary to replace the entire panel with a new one. This can be a more expensive option, but it will provide the greatest level of safety and reliability. Replacing the entire panel allows for the installation of modern breakers with updated safety features. It also provides the opportunity to upgrade the panel to a higher amperage rating, which may be necessary if the electrical demands of the home have increased since the original panel was installed. When considering whether to replace the entire FPE panel, it is important to weigh the costs and benefits of each option. The electrician can provide a detailed cost estimate for both retrofitting the panel with new old stock breakers and replacing the entire panel. The electrician can also explain the potential risks and benefits of each option, helping the homeowner to make an informed decision. Ultimately, the decision of whether to retrofit an old FPE panel with new old stock non-FPE breakers or replace the entire panel is a personal one. However, by consulting with a qualified electrician and carefully considering the costs and benefits of each option, the homeowner can make the best choice for their specific needs. An important point to remember is that electrical work can be dangerous and should only be performed by qualified professionals. Attempting to perform electrical work without the proper training and experience can result in serious injury or even death. It is always best to hire a licensed electrician to perform any electrical work in your home. Licensed electricians have the knowledge, skills, and experience necessary to perform electrical work safely and correctly. They are also required to follow all applicable electrical codes and regulations. By hiring a licensed electrician, you can be sure that the electrical work in your home will be done safely and to the highest standards. When selecting an electrician, it is important to check their credentials and references. Make sure that the electrician is licensed and insured, and ask for references from previous customers. You can also check online reviews to see what other people have to say about the electrician's work. Once you have selected an electrician, be sure to get a written estimate for the work before they begin. The estimate should include a detailed breakdown of the cost of materials and labor. It is also important to agree on a payment schedule before the work begins. By taking these precautions, you can help to ensure that your electrical work is done safely and to your satisfaction. New Jersey Electrical Code requires adherence to the National Electrical Code, or NEC, which is updated every 3 years. The NEC provides comprehensive standards for electrical installations to ensure safety. Some key NEC articles relevant to panel and breaker replacements include Article 110.3, which covers examination, identification, installation, and use of equipment, requiring listed or labeled equipment to be installed and used in accordance with any instructions included in the listing or labeling. Article 240 covers overcurrent protection, including circuit breakers and fuses, specifying requirements for their selection, installation, and protection of conductors. Article 408 covers switchboards, switchgear, and panel boards, including requirements for their installation, wiring, and overcurrent protection. In addition to these NEC articles, there may be local amendments to the electrical code that must be followed. It is important to check with the local building department to determine if there are any local amendments in effect. One important aspect of breaker selection is the interrupting rating, as previously mentioned. The interrupting rating of a breaker must be sufficient to interrupt the available fault current at the point of installation. If the interrupting rating of the breaker is too low, the breaker may fail to interrupt the current during a short circuit, which could result in equipment damage or personal injury. The available fault current can be calculated using engineering methods, or it can be determined by contacting the local utility company. When replacing breakers in an existing panel, it is important to use breakers that are specifically listed for use in that panel. Using breakers that are not listed for use in the panel can create a safety hazard and may violate the electrical code. Breaker manufacturers typically provide information on which breakers are listed for use in specific panels. This information can be found on the manufacturer's website or in their product catalogs. When replacing a panel, it is important to choose a panel that is properly sized for the electrical load of the building. The panel should have sufficient capacity to handle all of the existing circuits, as well as any future circuits that may be added. The size of the panel is typically expressed in terms of amperage. A typical residential panel may be rated for 100 amps, 150 amps, or 200 amps. The size of the panel should be determined by a qualified electrician based on the electrical load of the building. It is also important to ensure that the panel is properly grounded. Grounding is an essential safety feature that helps to protect against electric shock. The grounding system provides a path for fault current to flow back to the source, which causes the breaker to trip and energize the circuit. The grounding system must be installed in accordance with the electrical code. It is also important to periodically inspect the grounding system to ensure that it is in good condition. Over time, the grounding connections can corrode or become loose, which can compromise the effectiveness of the grounding system. If you notice any signs of corrosion or looseness, you should contact a qualified electrician to inspect and repair the grounding system. In summary, retrofitting an old FPE panel with new old stock non-FPE breakers can be a reasonable solution to address concerns about the reliability of the original FPE breakers. However, it is important to consider the compatibility, availability, cost, and reliability of the new old stock breakers. It is also essential to consult with a qualified electrician to assess the specific needs of the electrical system and determine the best course of action. By following these guidelines, you can help to ensure that the electrical system in your home is safe and reliable.